Minister, thank you for your time. With regarding your presentation and the whole budget debate and what's going to happen at your end after Budget 2015 is passed in the National Assembly, let's talk a little bit about hinterland development. From your end, what are some of the areas of emphasis that you're going to look at in terms of hinterland development, empowering and improving the lives of our indigenous brothers and sisters?
Thank you, and I must thank you for this opportunity whereby I can tell Guyana, the whole of Guyana, what is our intention as the Ministry of Communities, and especially as a minister within the Ministry of Communities, what are some of the programs and policies that we want to implement in the regions as soon as the estimates are approved. Now, if you had listened to my budget speech, most of it was on empowering the people, whether they're the two shells and the village council, the RDCs or the NDCs, wherever these governments, smaller governments I should say, are found, we would like to build their capacity, because for the past years you'd realize that that wasn't being done. For example, we had RDCs in the regions, they would just go and they have no means of transportation provided for them, that whereby they could have gone to different villages to have consultation, discuss with them exactly what are their priorities, and then with those programs that the people would have shared with them, they would have been now coming to RDC to share that with the RDC whenever they have RDC's meeting, and that becomes a part of the budget. But that was not being done. In some regions, like in 7, you may have had, but just a little. What happens mostly is the REOs or the other higher authorities in the region would go and make their visits, and then they would have come back. But we want to turn it the other way around. We want to empower them. They must feel a part of it. They must buy into these ideas, programs, whatever they have. So, when it is done, they must have an ownership of it. And I think that's the way we should go. Because if you just give, especially in some Armenian communities, if you go and you give them, they will expect you to be giving them every year. And we tend to call that handouts. But if you teach them how to fish, you give them like a start, you give them some microfunding or what have you, and then you empower their capacity, you teach them managerial skills, whatever it is that is appropriate for them in their communities. I think that's a better way to go. And that is what the Ministry of Communities has intended to do throughout the hinterland regions.
Let us focus a little bit on healthcare delivery within these communities. There have been reports in the past that some of these areas don't have adequate access to medical supplies and that sort of thing. Can we see all of these issues addressed and all of these systems put in place to change this whole healthcare delivery process?
Yes, of course, that is where we would like to go. And you would have seen, even through the estimate, the questionings, they have now allotted more monies on the health delivery of medical supplies. And that is because in the past, most cases, when they would send their requests, some of their requests would be sent into this community, but most times other drugs which are not frequently used by the residents, were sometimes sent into these communities, and what you would find is that they would expire. So we're trying to change that now. When the health workers, the medics, the doctors, whoever is there, they must be able to send their consumption list, have a report how many drugs, if it's Panadols, whatever, was used, and what are some of the drugs that are frequently used, which should be supplied. For example, there are villages that suffer a lot from malaria, and what we found, when there is an outbreak, the drugs just finish because it wasn't adequate. And what we find so alarming, that other business people would now have these selling in the shops. And when that is done, the people will have no other choice but then to go to buy from the shops.
When these drugs are really supposed to have been delivered to them free.
Right. They would end up going to buy from the shop. So that is what we're trying to reverse. We would like the persons who are there on the ground to make that requisition. And of course, they have to be accountable how they distribute the drugs. So by the end of a month or whatever period, you will know exactly how much drugs was used and how much would be requested to go further.
What about education delivery? What are some areas of emphasis?
Well, for education delivery in terms of youth, you may have heard that we have, it may not be addressed in this budget here, but we have plans to address it in the 2016 budget, whereby we would like to engage, especially a lot of the dropouts. We have some youth as young as 13, 14 who would drop out from third form class, all because they're not encouraged, they're not motivated. We don't have the teachers at the primary tops, who would really push them to go ahead and do these projects. So frustrated, they would tend to drop and they would leave to go into the farms or the mines. So we want to capture those youth whereby we can have programs for them. Programs, as I said, that are appropriate for the communities. Because what happens, like, if a little engine, a generator, or a freezer breaks down in there, for those who have, they have to be flown out to Georgetown to be repaired, and that's additional cost. Whereby if we had our youth with those skills, they'd be earning money and at the same time satisfying the needs of the residents. So
that's a very good initiative.
Yeah, so
let us talk in terms of infrastructure. Infrastructure in terms of roads and where possible, state buildings, health facilities, maybe educational facilities. You mentioned local government organs, their offices to deliver services and all that. What are we looking at in terms of that?
Well, firstly, we would want and we will work towards enhancing these buildings that are there. Some of our local government offices are not pleasant to the eye. It should go wrong. It wasn't functional for many years. And so we would want to, maintain, repair those buildings, and if any new infrastructure that we're going to build, whatever we build, we would really want it to be effective. So just not like in terms of you build a school and you leave it there. We want to build it, we want to furnish it so that the children could really get access to education. That's the way we would like to go. In terms of other infrastructure, we'd be like looking at the airstrips. We have some aerodromes, airstrips that really need repairs. So,
Minister, finally, what about empowering the women in terms of enhancing their skills in the areas of craft and others? What are the programs, what are the plans of your ministry in this particular area?
Well, of course, we cannot leave out the women, and we may not be able to do it in our ministry, but we will collaborate with, like, Ministry of Social Protection. We're going to collaborate with other ministries that, would have programs and plans for women. We want to include our women, teach them skills also, because we have a lot of young women, middle-aged women who do not earn any form of income, and that makes it very difficult for them to sustain and help their children to go to school, to keep them going. So that's the way we want to go with our women. Offer them opportunities to build their capacity.
What about where do you see hinterland development at the end of 2020?
Well, at the end of 2020, we would like to bridge the gap between the hinterland and the coastline.
Interesting.
Right, and you may have heard soon that we plan to establish towns in 4 of the hinterland regions, which will, in the end, offer services that were not available to them within the regions, like obtaining the passports, birth certificates, and banking services, etc. That's a very hard thing for us to do, but we will have to go that way if we really want to see development in our hinterlands.
So we're looking at completely modern development in the hinterland communities.
Yes, in terms of information, communication, we would like to take those services into our regions.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for having me.